For a long time, business success was built on big moves, big launches, big expansions, big bets that could change everything overnight. Companies were rewarded for bold decisions: enter a new market, acquire a competitor, release a major product. These were the moments that defined growth, and for years that approach worked. But today something is changing. The advantage is quietly shifting away from big moves and towards small adjustments, not dramatic changes, not headline-grabbing decisions, but constant, deliberate refinement. And most people don't notice it happening, because small adjustments don't look impressive, they don't create hype, they don't generate attention. But over time, they create something much more powerful: momentum. To understand this shift, you have to look at the environment businesses are operating in today. Markets are more competitive, costs are higher, margins are tighter, and mistakes are more expensive. In that kind of environment, big moves become riskier. A single large decision can have a massive impact, positive or negative. And when the downside risk increases, companies naturally become more cautious. But they still need to improve. They still need to grow. So instead of making big, risky changes, they start making smaller, controlled ones. Adjust pricing slightly, improve a process, refine a feature, optimize a workflow. Individually, these changes seem minor, but collectively, they add up. And over time, they can outperform a single big move. This is the core of the shift. Instead of relying on breakthrough moments, businesses are relying on continuous improvement. And that changes how success is built. Because small adjustments are easier to test, they're easier to reverse, they carry less risk. If something doesn't work, the impact is limited. You can adjust again. You can learn and adapt. Big moves don't offer that flexibility. When you make a large decision, you're often committed. The cost of reversing it is high. The consequences are harder to manage. So in a more uncertain environment, smaller adjustments become more attractive. But there's another reason this shift is happening. Data. Businesses now have access to more data than ever before. They can track behavior in real time. They can see what works and what doesn't. They can measure performance at a very detailed level. And that enables a different approach. Instead of making assumptions and taking big bets, companies can make small changes based on actual data. Test something, measure the result, adjust again. This creates a loop of continuous improvement. And over time, that loop becomes a competitive advantage. Because while one company is waiting to make a big move, another is making hundreds of small improvements. And those improvements compound. That compounding effect is easy to underestimate. A 1% improvement might not seem significant. But repeated over time, it becomes meaningful. Processes become more efficient. Products become easier to use. Costs become better controlled. And the overall system becomes stronger. This is how many successful companies are operating today. Not through dramatic shifts, but through constant refinement. There's also a cultural shift behind this. Big moves often come from top-down decisions. Leadership decides, and the organization executes. But small adjustments can happen everywhere. Teams can experiment. Individuals can improve their workflows. Departments can optimize their processes. This creates a more distributed model of progress. Improvement is no longer limited to major decisions. It happens continuously across the organization. And that increases speed, not in terms of big changes, but in terms of consistent progress. But this approach requires a different mindset. Because small adjustments don't feel exciting. They don't create immediate, visible impact. They require patience, they require discipline, and they require trust in the process. Because the results are not instant, they build over time. And that's where many companies struggle. They still look for big wins, they still expect dramatic results, and when they don't see them, they underestimate the value of incremental improvement. But the companies that understand this shift think differently. They don't chase breakthroughs, they build systems. Systems that allow continuous improvement. Systems that capture feedback. Systems that enable small changes to be tested and scaled. And once those systems are in place, improvement becomes part of the business itself. Not something that happens occasionally, but something that happens constantly. There's also a strategic advantage to this approach. When you rely on big moves, your success depends on being right. You need to make the correct decision at the right time. But when you rely on small adjustments, your success depends on learning. You don't need to be right immediately. You just need to improve consistently. And that's a much more reliable path. Because learning compounds, each adjustment gives you more information. Each iteration improves your understanding. And over time, that leads to better decisions. So instead of trying to predict the future perfectly, companies are adapting to it continuously. And that's a powerful shift, but it doesn't mean big moves are gone. They still happen, they still matter, but they are becoming less frequent and more calculated because companies are using small adjustments to reduce uncertainty before making larger decisions. They test ideas on a smaller scale. They validate assumptions, and only then do they commit to bigger moves. So in a way, small adjustments are not replacing big moves. They are reshaping them, making them more informed, more controlled, less risky, and this is what defines the new approach. Less reliance on single dramatic actions, more focus on consistent, incremental progress. Because in today's environment, the companies that win are not always the ones that make the biggest moves. They're the ones that improve the fastest. Quietly, consistently, over time. And that's the shift most people don't see. From big moments to small adjustments that never stop.